Well, good morning. It is great to see everybody this morning. Got a good crowd, and we are so very, very thankful that you have chosen to come and to be with us, that we can worship God together, and that we might be able to maybe come to grips a little bit better with some of the challenges that we face in this life. If I were to ask you, what is the one thing that you fear the most? What would it be? The one thing that you fear the most. Well, you kind of pondered that for a while, and we soon began to come to an understanding, I think, that one of the things that we fear the most is the concept of death. We spend millions of dollars in health and wellness to take care of our body and to try and prolong our days. We spend a lot of money to take care of medical needs, to try and tweak those things that maybe are not working as well as they should, and to try and gain a better degree of health. It may be that we spend a lot of money in terms of security to make sure that we ward off those who would be intrusive, those that we fear might want to do us harm, and we want to take steps to protect ourselves so that that would not be a fate that might befall us. A lot of our activities may be modified a little bit because there are some places that we deem to be dangerous, and being in that situation might put us in danger and might imperil our lives. And it's been a long-standing observation written about by many of that drive and determination that we have to survive, that fight for survival, regardless of all the obstacles that we face. There's a strong will within us to live, and the concept of death oftentimes is absolutely terrifying to us. Satan understands the fear that we have, and also, I believe, uses it as a bit of a manipulation tool, if you will. Over in Job chapter 2, as you remember the trials and the difficulties that Job went through, we find that Satan first tried to break him by all different kinds of calamities that beset him. The death of his children, the losing of his wealth, and other things just happened in abundance all at one time. And yet, Job remained faithful to the Lord. And so there was a second conversation that took place in Job chapter 2 and going down to verse 4. Once again, Job is pointed out as being someone who had stood all of these trials and was still trying to do that which was right. And so the Lord told Satan, behold, Job is hanging in there. He's an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. And Satan said, well, he answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath, he will give for his life. He said, you let me afflict him physically, and let's see what happens. And God even allowed that. But the one thing he said, the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. You don't have my permission to kill him. But indeed, his life was made miserable with the boils that came upon him. Satan knows this love that we have for life and the fear that we have of death. And yet the scriptures talk to us a lot about death to help us understand the inevitability of it. That's one of the consequences of what happened when Adam and Eve brought sin into the world. no idea how long we're going to have it. But whenever the Hebrew writer was explaining some things about the scheme of how things go, he said in verse 27 of Hebrews chapter 9, it's appointed unto men once to die, and after this the judgment. We understand that we all have an appointment with death, but that is an appointment that we certainly are not anxious to see fulfilled. Let's try to draw a little bit of a parallel this morning and talk about the way in which the concept of death affects us, our feelings, and some of the things that happen as we contemplate the ending of our days here. Let's use an illustration. Let's say that we are told that we have a very serious physical condition, and in order for us to survive this thing, we're going to have maybe a very risky surgery that's going to have to take place. So we are given notice that this is what is inevitable for us, and maybe even the statistics of our surviving that surgery is rather limited. It may be then that we begin to talk to family, we begin to share this information that we've been given, but almost inevitably, the first thing that sets in is fear. We're concerned about how this is going to turn out. Is the surgery going to be successful? Are we going to be able to survive this? What if things are, and that's where we begin with the next stage of this. All of the what ifs. And we kind of feed that fear a little bit. What if this happens? What if that happens? And we can wind up with some very sleepless nights, a great deal of apprehension, and we are very concerned about what is going to become of us because we've got to have this surgery and it just might not go right, and we're in no hurry to make that appointment with death. But as we chew on this a little bit, so to speak, we mull it over in our minds, we think about the eventualities of it, we're able as Christians to be able to understand, wait a minute, I'm going to be able to handle this because of my trust in God. Yeah, it's unnerving. It's scary for everybody. But as we begin to think about the situation, we're not going to have some rookie cutting us open. Remember that Geico commercial? The doctor comes in, oh, by the way, I've been reinstated. I think it's almost official. And they ask you, do you know what you're doing? Well, I'm not really sure, but we'll figure this out. You know the commercial. And it's one of those of they're not real happy about just basics. But as we look at this surgery, we're pretty sure that the doctor knows what he's doing. That he's been down this road before. This isn't his first case. And then as we begin to work past that initial fear, most importantly, we understand that the whole eventuality rests in the hands of God. That all things work together for good. And that God is the ultimate healer. And that our recovery is in His hands. Because there are some cases, of course, where maybe it was considered a minor surgery, if there is such a thing. And it was all just assumed that everything was going to be quick and easy with a quick recovery. And lo and behold, there was the unexpected complication and someone died. Happens. We just, as James tells us, have to understand that life is a vapor. It appears for a little time and it vanishes away. And we don't know the day and time in which our days here are going to expire. And so our prayer life increases as we beseech God to help and to see us through, to bless the doctors that are going to be working with us, and may every procedure go well. But then there are also all of those other encouragers, all the other friends and family, our brothers and sisters in Christ, that are praying for us, and we know that God hears all those petitions. And we know that as we go under the knife, so to speak, that we have all the support of so many folks who are hoping that all is going to go well. They've asked God to bless all of this. And so as our trust level increases in God and with the encouragement of others, even our trust in the medical professionals working with us, we learn more about the procedures, we learn more about the follow-up, we learn more about what is going to probably be the positive outcome of this. The fear diminishes because we've grown in trust. We're going to be able to make it through this. It's going to work out okay. And so then finally, the day of the surgery comes. This is kind of that day of reckoning. This is actually going to be the procedures that maybe we initially feared so badly and are still not comfortable with all that's going to take place. But it was an inevitable appointment. It's what had to be done. It is the necessary step in order for us to have any hope of recovery and relief from all that we've been suffering from since we first got the notice that this surgery is going to be necessary. And so, yes, the procedure takes place and everything goes well, and then we await to our recovery. And yes, it may not be fun. I remember the first time after I had some recent surgery, they said, get up and walk, and I said, get up and what? Because that hurt. I could barely swing around to get my feet on the floor. But they assured me if I would just get up and move, it would be better. And sure enough, they were right. And over time, you began to experience tremendous relief, and there was a cause for great rejoicing because everything worked out. Everything was as God wanted it to be. His will was done, obviously. We're able to be reunited with friends and family, and we pick up from there to go into whatever is the next chapter of our lives. Now, whenever we look at it from this point of view, we kind of understand the emotional roller coaster that we go through here. Going into the valley of fear, but gradually working our way out of that because of our growing trust and knowledge, we hit the ultimate appointment, and there's rejoicing on the other side. Now, let's look at a few things in companionship to this that deals with what occurs whenever we face that final situation. Whenever the appointment is not going to be an appointment for a surgical procedure, but rather the ending of our days. And once again, we may be fortunate enough maybe not, depends on how you look at it, to have some inkling of what's coming. It may be that there is that conversation with the medical professional in which they say that we've simply done all that we can do. The prognosis is not good. The outcome is only going to be a matter of time. Now, really and truly, that's the same message for all of us. It's only a matter of time. Often I have known of individuals who were diagnosed as being terminal, and others were looked at as being in good health and everything was going fine with them, but then unexpectedly they passed through an undiagnosed condition. Maybe it's a car accident, whatever else, but we just don't have as much of an ironclad understanding of the schedule as we would like. But what happens whenever we are given that notice? The very same thing. This is a road that we haven't been down before. There's all kinds of uncertainties here, and we are struggling to come to terms with it. The Scriptures give us some verses to help us with this, and to help us understand that whatever comes at us in this life, we're equipped to deal with it. If we can kind of open our eyes a little. Over in 2 Timothy chapter 1 and going down to verse 7, it says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." In other words, living our lives in the fear of death is not what God intended. He has a different plan for our lives and expects us to be able to look at more of the joys that are here than to just focus on the fact that one day I'm going to die. You know, sometimes we can absolutely ruin a perfect present with our fears and upset of what we know is coming. Tammy's mom used to struggle with that some when she and I first got married. We'd get to come home for a few days. And rather than being able to enjoy the fact that we had come for a few days and we were going to get to have some fun together, and you're leaving when? And tomorrow you're going to be, and all of a sudden her focus was on the fact that this is going to be a short span of time. And so rather than being able to really enjoy the moment, so often her thoughts were dealing with the fact, yeah, but this is just going to be a temporary thing, and then they're going to be gone, and then it's going to, and that's what she would often dwell on. And yes, we know that death is a reality for all of us, but we don't need to go through every day just so upset and wringing our hands about maybe I'm going to die. Jesus said over in Matthew chapter 11, beginning of verse 28, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden." And that's part of what we're talking about. Those cares, those burdens, those things that aren't going right. The Lord says, "Come and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. How many times have we been in that depressed state and maybe even fearing the fact that our days are numbered, and we go to a passage like the 23rd Psalm and find great comfort there? That yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me. One of the things that maybe nurtures the fear is the idea of all of the unknowns that we do not understand. Sometimes, well, why me? Why did I have to be the one to get sick? Why did this calamity have to happen to me? Why this and why that? And so we focus on all of those unknowns, maybe even in thinking about the concepts of death. Is it going to be painful, or is it going to be quick? Is it going to be fast? Is it going to be slow? What about? What about? And the reason I think this kind of lesson is so timely in our generation is that we are becoming more and more a society that simply is focused on death. We live our lives here rather hopelessly, and then one day it's over. And this isn't right, and that isn't right, and this is a problem, and that is a problem, and we only got so many days to get this fixed before I die, and we can't enjoy the wonderful life that we have. We'll have some tell us that the whole planet's going to be dead in a matter of years. When I was a kid, it was the idea that nuclear war was the big fear, and someone's going to push a button and we're all going to die. And so we focus on some of those things that are beyond our control and totally unknown to us. And life is a weariness. It becomes a burden. It's just an endless cycle of fears that we don't know how to handle. Because we haven't got answers to them. They're problems that are beyond our scope of control. And if we want to let that just dwell in our minds and be our fixation all of the time, we'll be miserable. But through the Word of God, we've been shown an avenue wherein this can change. And we're dealing here with our trust in God. The Apostle Paul and others of the first century lived in the shadow of death almost all the time, because there were many people who did not want them proclaiming good news, that there is a reason to rejoice, that just because you've made some mistakes in your life, that doesn't mean that you're forever ruined, that through Jesus Christ things can be forgiven. They were presenting a new message that many people weren't ready to receive. Over in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, Paul said, "We have the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God, which raiseth the dead, who delivered us from so great a death, and doth deliver, in whom we trust that he will yet deliver." He said, yeah, one day death's going to come, but my trust is in God. He's the one who is the ultimate voice in this. The verdict is his. And so as I go through this life, there may be these problems and burdens that I've got to carry. And there are these worries that I must face. But I don't have to face them by myself. In 1 Peter chapter 5, and going down to verse 7, Peter says, "Cast all your care upon him, because he careth for you." We have a Savior who was tempted at all points like as we are. So he knows all of these unknowns, the source of all of these fears, all of these things that can kind of get us out of joint and can disrupt our happiness and our joy here. But we know that we have a Savior. Over in 1 Timothy chapter 4, and going down to verse 10, "For therefore we both labor and suffer reproach, because we trust in the living God, who is the Savior of all men, especially of those that believe." He said, I know it's going to be all right. Just as we developed the confidence that we were going to survive that surgery and that there would be better days ahead. The scriptures are giving us the admonition that if we trust in God and take the steps that He's told us to take to get ready for death, we don't have to be so afraid of it. Because we've been given bundles of information to help us. And there are going to be all kinds of people along the way who will once again be our encouragers, who will show us passages of Scripture, who will be a consolation for us, who will be there to help us whenever times get hard. Because we're going to strive our best to be ready for that day. The Apostle Paul can show us how this is applied over in 2 Timothy chapter 4. Here is a man that had spent his whole life knowing that there were people chasing after him and wanted to see him dead. But as he told the Corinthians, I have trust in God, that they can't do anything that God prevents them from doing. And if I survive whatever befalls me, it will be by the hand of God. Isn't that the same attitude that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had? Whenever the king threatened them and said, if you don't bow down to my idol, I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace. And they said, we'll survive. They said, we believe that God can deliver us, but if He doesn't deliver us from the flames, we know that ultimately we will be favored of Him because we did not abandon our faith. The king became even angrier, had them superheat that furnace, threw them in, and then saw 4 people walking around in there. He called them out, and their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. God miraculously delivered them. And we find the story, as they told the king, God can deliver. We don't know if He will or not. He can deliver us. But even if He allows us to perish, it's still going to be okay. Because we trust in God. As we look at our lives here, we can have the consolation that Paul had. Here in 2 Timothy 4, beginning in verse 6, he said, I'm now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I've fought a good fight. I've finished my course, and I've kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord the righteous judge shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love His appearing. Paul had come to terms with the concept of death. We can talk about, in comparison to the surgery, there is that appointment that all men must keep. As the Hebrew writer said, it's appointed unto men once to die, and after this the judgment. As much as we may not like to think about it, we may not want to think about what we call morbid or the unpleasant concept of death. Solomon in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 gives here a portrait of what happens as we grow older. Our vision becomes dim. Our sleep becomes much lighter. We're not able to chew our food and function as well as we used to. And eventually, the silver cord will be loosed, or that golden bowl will be broken, or the pitcher shall be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. That day is going to come. And he explains, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto the God that gave it. When we hit this eventuality, we find that now things are going to be dramatically different for us. Because this mortal body that we've been so accustomed to is going to pass away. We are going to die. And while this physical body will be laid to rest in some location or another, the spirit is going to go back to God again. We move from this physical world that we've known on this side of things, and now we move into the realm of the spirit world, I will use for lack of a better term. Because there's a part of us that is going to live on eternally. It's going to be a fact that that spirit is separated from the physical body. And we will no longer be walking around here, eating meals with friends and spending time with our loved ones. Everything that this body was determined to do, that course will be finished. Paul knew, he said, the time of my departure is at hand. And things will change. Now, one of the things we have to understand with that is that does not mean that we go into some sense of oblivion where there is no more consciousness and no more knowledge of what's going on around us. Jesus gave the story in Luke chapter 16 of Lazarus and the rich man. And while there's a lot to be said about this story and a lot of things that can be debated one way or another, the fact is that Lazarus woke up, so to speak, in one spiritual domain, and the rich man woke up too in another condition. You know, a lot of people, this is where there's a lot of breakdown today, in that folks who don't know very much about God and His control of things will get to thinking about how terrible my life is and all these things are going wrong. I think I'm just going to end it and I'll just go ahead and die, as if that's going to solve everything. No. That just pushes us into the spirit world, where we're going to have to give an accounting for all the choices that we've made in this life. Whenever we look at the story of the rich man and Lazarus, both Lazarus and the rich man were conscious. The rich man began to talk about the 5 brothers that he had back down on the earth, and I don't want them to come to a place like this. There was an awareness of where I am and an awareness of what's going on back there. So it doesn't just let us move into oblivion. See, the popular picture is that since folks have not been there to go back and tell us all about it, when you see hands folded in death, that they look like they're sleeping and it's just a nice quiet oblivion, and now they just cease to exist. Or oftentimes people automatically believe that once they die, they automatically go to a place of rest and comfort. No. There's more to the story. We'll be talking a little bit more about that next week. But dealing with the concept of dying is one that is a challenge for us to grapple with. I've been very thankful down through the years that there have been some songwriters and others who, through poetry and song, have tried to help us come to terms with this reality. One of the songs that we might look at, number 350, is talking about this very thing. I think we know this one. Let's sing it. Number 350. My maiden sun is sinking fast, my race is nearly run. My strongest trials now are past, my triumph is begun. Oh, come, angel band, come. sad. Oh, bear me away on your snowy wings to my immortal home. Oh, bear me away on your snowy wings to my immortal home. So as Satan has used the fear of death as his ace, so to speak, to curtail our affairs of this life, to often worry us and burden us down. It's kind of like some other card games that you play. An ace may be a powerful card, but if you happen to have one suit that has trump that is trump, it can even take care of that ace. And the trump that we have is Jesus Christ. Through the shedding of his blood, we can be ready for this transition. Next week, I hope to kind of pick up from here and go on with what we're looking at here as we cross from this life to the next. And the things that the Bible teaches us about what to expect as we move into that domain. But as we leave our lesson this morning, the important thing is to simply ask the question, are you ready for that transition? Are you ready for that day to come when your life here is ended, this body is laid to rest, and now you're going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ to give an account for all the decisions that you made back along here. We know the day's coming. The notice has already been given. It's appointed that a man wants to die, and after this, the judgment. And there are a lot of folks who are going to try to weather all of this life and get from here to here without ever developing any confidence and trust in God. And it will be a fearful day. To face the Lord unprepared, when you could have trusted, been shown the path as to how to live and how to be ready to die and be ready to meet the Lord. That involves your becoming a Christian and being baptized for the remission of your sins. If there's some steps you need to take today to be ready to meet the Lord. As James told us, we said at the outset of the lesson, our life's like a vapor. We don't know when that time's going to come for us. But if the Lord tarries, it will come for everyone. If we can help you to get ready for that day, won't you come and let us help you even this morning as together.